Hey guys, tonight we embark on an epic, yet surprisingly serene, voyage across the vast Pacific Ocean, tracing the footsteps the paddle strokes of Polynesian navigators. Imagine yourself perched on the sleek hull of a double-hulled canoe, the warm ocean breeze brushing your face, the salty tang of sea spray in the air, and a night sky so thick with stars it feels like the universe has pressed its palm against your cheek. You're surrounded by nothing but waves and stars, and no GPS in sight. You probably won't survive this, but hey, the ancient Polynesians did, so maybe there's hope for you yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are sailing these metaphorical seas right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Long before GPS satellites, radar, or even those fancy magnetic compasses, Polynesian navigators set out on what seem like impossible voyages hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles across open ocean. No landmarks, no roads, no buoys, just the sky above, the waves beneath, and a deep, intuitive understanding of their environment. These voyages charted a web of islands scattered across the Pacific like distant gems, from Hawaii to New Zealand, Tahiti to Easter Island. The sheer scale of their travels is mind-boggling. You're here now, reading this, thanks to their courage and cunning, or at least, so many scholars believe. Historians still argue whether these vast migrations were accidental driftings or deliberate, carefully planned journeys. But the evidence leans heavily toward intention. These were skilled wayfinders who had a mental atlas of stars, winds, currents, and animal behavior. You could say they were the original celestial hackers. Their story begins with a hunger not just for food, but for discovery, new homes, and connection. Early Polynesians came from island groups in Southeast Asia and Melanesia and gradually pushed eastward, stepping stone by stepping stone. You can almost hear the excited chatter as crews prepared their canoes, trading stories about the stars and the ocean's mood. Imagine the scent of freshly cut koa wood from Hawaii or breadfruit roasting in the galley fire as the navigator scanned the horizon. That first section of the journey was as much about trust as technique. Trust in the captain, trust in the stars, trust in the ocean's subtle signals, and, sometimes, trust in sheer luck. The Pacific isn't a friendly neighbor. It's a vast, watery expanse that swallows ships whole if you don't respect it. Here's a quirky detail. Some scholars suggest early Polynesians used a form of ocean sonar, feeling the canoe's subtle vibrations through their feet and the hull to detect underwater reefs or approaching landforms. It sounds a little like an underwater dance party, but those vibrations might have been vital clues in the days before modern instruments. The challenge of these journeys was enormous. Navigators memorized hundreds of stars and their rising and setting points, all shifting with the seasons. The canoe crews learned to read ocean swells that are invisible to most, noticing the way waves refracted or changed pattern as they neared land. The wind whispered secrets, birds flew home at dusk, and the clouds hinted at island shadows far below. Navigators were not just sailors. They were philosophers of the sea, combining empirical observation with a spiritual respect for nature. Their knowledge was encyclopedic and experimental, passed down orally in chants and stories, ensuring no detail was forgotten. You might say they were the ultimate multitaskers, staring at the sky, listening to the waves, and keeping an eye on the crew, all while balancing on a rocking canoe that felt like a toy boat in your bathtub. This knowledge was a precious treasure, guarded and revered, making navigators some of the most respected members of Polynesian society. Not only did they ensure survival, but they also connected distant islands, cultures, and generations. So, as you settle deeper into your seat, imagine yourself slipping into this world where every ripple, breeze, and star is part of a vast, living map. A world where the sky is your compass, and the ocean, your silent guide. That's the beginning of the Polynesian navigation story, the story of how humans mastered the art of reading stars and waves, long before any of us thought it possible. Now, you find yourself staring up at the night sky, where the Polynesian navigators honed their most famous tool, the star map. Picture it: hundreds of shimmering points of light, arranged not randomly but in precise patterns that shift gradually with the seasons. These were not just pretty dots. They were ancient guideposts, celestial signposts that told the way across thousands of miles of open ocean. The art of reading stars wasn't about using charts or compasses but about memorizing complex star paths. Navigators knew exactly when and where certain stars would rise and set on the horizon, and they used those points as a directional framework. For example, if the star Sirius appeared just above the bow of your canoe, you knew you were headed roughly southwest. When the star Aldebaran slipped below the horizon, you might be approaching land. This mental sky map was constantly updated with experience and observation. One of the more famous features was the concept of star lines, paths traced by the rising and setting points of specific stars. Think of them as invisible highways in the sky. The navigator would track these star lines nightly, cross-referencing their position with the ocean's mood. It was like navigating with a cosmic GPS powered entirely by memory. Here's a fun but lesser-known tidbit. Polynesian navigators sometimes used star compass models, circular frameworks that represented the horizon divided into 32 directional points. But this compass wasn't something you held. It lived entirely inside the navigator's head, an internal spinning wheel of stars. Imagine having a mental globe, constantly turning and shifting with the tides of time and space. Historians still argue whether these star maps were strictly fixed or allowed room for improvisation. Some scholars believe navigators memorized fixed star positions, while others argue the system was more fluid, adapting to weather conditions, ocean currents, and even spiritual guidance. Either way, the precision is astounding. Without electronic aids, these navigators crossed the Pacific with astonishing accuracy. The stars themselves had names and personalities. Some were considered ancestors or gods watching over the voyagers, while others served practical purposes like marking time for fishing or planting seasons. The night sky was not a distant void but a living tapestry intertwined with everyday life. Imagine this. When you look up at Orion's belt tonight, you might only see 3 bright stars. But for a Polynesian navigator, those stars told a story of journey, direction, and timing. The rising and setting of these stars were signals, much like the changing colors of traffic lights in a busy city. There's a quirky side to star navigation too. Some Polynesian voyagers reportedly navigated by dead reckoning during cloudy nights when stars were hidden, using the swells and waves as their guide instead. This reliance on the stars meant that overcast skies were no small inconvenience. They demanded heightened attention to other senses. The memorization of star paths was a rigorous mental exercise, often passed down through apprenticeship. Stories and chants encoded star positions and navigational knowledge in poetic form, making it easier to remember. It was navigation meets oral literature. So, next time you find yourself stargazing, imagine the endless nights spent memorizing these luminous guides, their slow rise and fall dictating the fate of entire communities. Those stars weren't just lights. They were lifelines, silently guiding ancient sailors across a seemingly infinite blue canvas. You lean forward, focusing on the restless ocean beneath your canoe, realizing it's not just a big bathtub but a vast, ever-changing map in itself. The Polynesian navigators were masters of reading the ocean swells, a subtle, almost hypnotic skill that let them sense where they were and where they were going just by feeling the motion of the waves. Imagine standing barefoot on a rocking canoe, your feet glued to the wood, muscles tuned to shifts that most people wouldn't notice even in a storm. Ocean swells aren't random. They're like the heartbeat of the sea, traveling vast distances from far-off storms or steady trade winds. Navigators learned to identify different swell patterns, some smooth and rolling, others jagged or choppy, and to tell which swells were generated by local winds or by distant islands disrupting the water's flow. Here's a quirky nugget. Some traditional wayfinders reportedly claimed they could even detect the shadow of an island in the ocean swell patterns, where waves bent or refracted around submerged reefs or landmasses. It's almost as if the ocean itself whispered the secret location of hidden lands, and the navigator just had to listen carefully. Historians still argue whether this ocean swell reading was learned through formal teaching or was more of an intuitive skill developed through countless hours at sea. What is certain is that this knowledge wasn't written down. It lived in the navigator's body and mind, a kind of somatic map that guided every crossing. Imagine the waves as overlapping conversations, some friendly and slow, others urgent and fast, each telling a different part of the story. The navigator's challenge was to untangle these messages, distinguishing between swells created by distant storms, local winds, or island interference. On a practical note, knowing how the swells changed near land was crucial for safe landfall. As you approached an island, the ocean's surface would grow more complex. The regular swells would scatter or bump against one another, creating patterns that shouted land ahead. You'd want to catch that message before it was too late, because those final miles could mean the difference between a warm welcome or a capsized canoe. Another fascinating detail, some navigators used a technique called wave piloting, steering their canoe in patterns that allowed them to sense changes in the swell's direction and strength. It's like feeling your way through a dark room by the echoes and drafts. This reliance on ocean swells meant that Polynesian voyagers were finely attuned not only to visual cues but to the rhythm and feel of their environment. It's almost a meditation on water, a deep conversation between human and sea. And here's a sleepy little joke to keep you afloat. Why did the Polynesian navigator bring a pillow? To rest on the waves, of course. So, as you drift in your imagination on these ancient swells, remember the incredible sensitivity required to interpret the ocean's language. The waves weren't just obstacles. They were guides, mentors, and friends. Now, as your canoe glides gently over the deep blue, your attention shifts to the skies above and the life teeming all around you. Polynesian navigators didn't just look up and down, they watched the creatures of the sea and air for vital clues, trusting the behaviors of birds and marine animals like secret messages about where land might lie. Think of them as natural GPS units with feathers and fins. Seabirds, especially, were key informants. Certain species never stray far from land, so if you spotted a bird flying out to sea in the early morning or returning at dusk, it was a good bet that an island was nearby. The direction, altitude, and flight pattern of these birds told navigators how far away land was, sometimes within a day's travel or just a few hours. A fun, quirky fact is that some birds, like the frigate bird, can fly hundreds of miles without landing, so their presence wasn't always a guarantee of immediate landfall. Still, the way they circled or rested on the water gave subtle hints. And if you caught sight of a sudden flock heading inland, that was often a reliable sign. Historians still argue whether navigators used birds solely as directional aids or also as a timekeeping tool, tracking their behavior patterns to estimate how far or fast they had traveled. The complexity of bird behavior and migration patterns makes this a fascinating, ongoing debate. Marine animals played a part, too. Dolphins and certain fish species tended to stay near islands, and their sudden appearance in open water could mean land was near. Navigators also noticed changes in water color and temperature, often caused by underwater reefs or island slopes, signaling you were getting close to shore. One charming detail is that some wayfinders reportedly paid attention to the smell of the ocean air. Certain islands emitted distinct scents from plants or volcanic activity that, carried on the breeze, could be detected by the sensitive nose of a seasoned sailor. Imagine navigating by a bouquet of tropical flowers mixed with salty ocean spray, quite the sensory experience. This reliance on living creatures highlights the deep ecological awareness Polynesian navigators cultivated. Their navigation wasn't just mechanical. It was deeply integrated with the rhythms of nature. They trusted the birds, fish, clouds, and even smells as partners in their voyage. If you think about it, this feels like relying on your dog to tell you when the mail carrier is near, except way more high stakes. And in a way, it's humbling to realize that long before tech gadgets, humans found intimate ways to connect with nature's messengers. So as you settle further into this nighttime journey, imagine scanning the skies for a soaring tern or spotting a pod of dolphins playing in the canoe's wake. Every living thing was a signpost in the vast blue wilderness, guiding you home. With your senses finely tuned to stars, swells, and wildlife, you now dive deeper into the heart of Polynesian navigation, wayfinding the ancient art of piecing together sky, sea, and living clues into a seamless, living map. This is no mere skill. It's a kind of oceanic meditation, where observation, memory, and intuition dance together under a vast sky. Wayfinding isn't about relying on instruments or charts, those came much later. It's about blending 1,000 tiny signals into a coherent sense of direction. You watch the rising stars, Feel the direction of the swells, note the flight of birds, and the way clouds hang low on the horizon. Each piece is a thread woven into a mental tapestry that guides your canoe across thousands of miles. Here's a quirky thought. Some navigators reportedly practiced a kind of sensory fasting, spending long stretches in silence and stillness to sharpen their perception of the sea's subtle cues. It's almost like a yoga for your senses, training you to hear the ocean's whispers amid its roar. Historians still argue whether wayfinding was an innate talent that only some possessed or a skill everyone could learn with enough practice. Either way, it was regarded as a sacred craft, passed down through generations with reverence. Imagine the challenge. You're on a rocking canoe, the sky blanketed with stars, the ocean shifting beneath you, and you must make split-second judgments about where to steer. Your mental compass spins silently as you balance the sensory data, checking it against memory and experience. The mental map you carry includes star paths, swell directions, wind shifts, bird behaviors, and even cloud formations. It's a multidimensional puzzle solved in real time, with no room for error. A wrong turn could send you spiraling into the endless blue, and while the ocean is generous, it's not forgiving. The beauty of wayfinding is its fluidity. Unlike modern navigation, which relies on fixed coordinates, wayfinding adapts. If clouds obscure the stars, you shift to reading the swells or spotting birds. If the ocean is calm, you watch the wind or the position of the sun. It's a dynamic conversation with nature. Here's a sleepy little joke to keep your mind afloat. Why don't wayfinders get lost? Because they always follow their inner tide. This fluidity made Polynesian voyaging resilient. When one method failed, another stepped in. The navigator was a master of balance, constantly weighing and adjusting. And perhaps most importantly, wayfinding was a communal effort. The navigator led, but the crew shared knowledge, watched for signs, and kept spirits high. Voyages were as much about social cohesion as about geographic direction. So, as you drift with me through this sea of stars and waves, imagine yourself becoming part of this delicate dance where every sense is alert, every moment precious, and the horizon forever promising new lands, new stories, and new beginnings. Your hands now rest on the smooth wooden rails of a double-hulled canoe, the preferred vessel of Polynesian navigators. The design of these canoes wasn't just about style, it was a technological marvel tailored to the challenges of vast ocean voyaging. Stability, speed, and endurance were paramount, and the construction itself influenced how far and safely you could travel. The double hulls, connected by crossbeams and topped with a platform, provided exceptional balance in choppy seas. Imagine trying to ride a single canoe in the middle of the Pacific's rolling swells. Your chances of capsizing would skyrocket. The twin hulls acted like outriggers, keeping the vessel steady while slicing through waves with surprising grace. A quirky but fascinating tidbit is that some canoes were so well designed that they could even sail upwind, an impressive feat for wooden vessels without modern sails. The shape of the hulls, combined with sophisticated sail designs like the crab claw sail, allowed skilled crews to maneuver effectively against the wind. You might say these canoes were the luxury yachts of their day if luxury meant survival on an endless ocean. Historians still argue how much the canoe design evolved before long-distance voyages became routine. Some evidence suggests that early canoes were smaller and less stable, limiting exploration, while later designs incorporated innovations borrowed from various island cultures, facilitating longer trips. The materials used in canoe construction were chosen with care. Hardwoods like koa or breadfruit wood were prized for their durability and buoyancy. The artisans who carved the hulls understood the wood's grain and flex, ensuring the canoe could withstand ocean stress without breaking apart. Building a canoe was also a social and spiritual event. The process involved rituals, chants, and community participation. The canoe wasn't just a tool, it was a sacred vessel carrying the hopes and lives of entire communities. You could say it was part boat, part temple. The sails themselves were marvels of weaving and design. Made from pandanus leaves or coconut fibers, they were lightweight but strong, shaped to catch the wind efficiently. The interplay between hull and sail was a dance perfected over generations. The size of the canoe influenced crew size, supplies, and the duration of voyages. Larger canoes could carry families, livestock, and food crops, turning voyages into full-scale migrations rather than simple fishing trips. Imagine loading your whole life onto a vessel the size of a small bus and trusting it to the sea. Here's a sleepy joke to lighten the load. Why did the canoe go to school? To improve its current affairs. Ultimately, the canoe's design was a critical factor in Polynesian navigation success. Without these sturdy, versatile vessels, the incredible ocean-crossing voyages might never have happened. So as you imagine the gentle sway of this twin-hulled canoe beneath you, remember that every plank and lash was a testament to ingenuity, culture, and survival on the open sea. As you settle deeper into the rhythm of the voyage, you realize that Polynesian navigation wasn't just about stars, waves, and canoes. It was a living tradition, passed down through generations by oral storytelling, chants, and mentorship. This was a knowledge system as rich and intricate as any written science, but entirely human and communal. Imagine sitting by the fire on a moonlit island night, where the elder navigator begins a chant, weaving the positions of stars, the direction of swells, and signs from nature into a mesmerizing song. These chants weren't just entertainment, they were mnemonic devices, carefully crafted to embed navigation wisdom into memory. Each verse encoded star paths, ocean currents, and even the timing of seasonal migrations. A quirky detail, some chants reportedly included playful or humorous elements, inside jokes, or memorable imagery to help apprentices remember tricky navigational details. Who knew ancient star maps could come with a punchline? Historians still argue how standardized these oral traditions were. Some suggest a strict curriculum for apprenticeships, while others propose more fluid, adaptive learning processes. Regardless, the transmission of knowledge was a solemn responsibility. Mentorship was key. Young navigators spent years learning at the side of a master, absorbing the art not just intellectually but through experience. They observed how a slight tilt of the head revealed a hidden star, or how the feel of the canoe changed with a subtle current shift. This embodied knowledge was as much felt as thought. The oral tradition extended beyond navigation into cultural identity. Stories of ancestral voyages, heroic explorers, and island discoveries were recited with pride and emotion, linking present generations to their ocean-faring past. You could say navigation was a thread stitching together time, space, and community. This way of passing down knowledge created resilience. Even in times of hardship, when external forces threatened to erase these traditions, the oral method kept the skills alive. It was an unbroken chain of learning and respect. Here's a sleepy joke to lighten the night. Why don't navigators ever lose their voice? Because they always know how to find their way back to the chorus. In a world without maps or written records, oral transmission was the lifeline. It demanded not just memory but passion, patience, and a deep connection to the sea. So, as you imagine sitting beside the fire, listening to the melodic hum of chants, picture the steady gaze of apprentices committing every word to heart, ready to carry the sacred knowledge forward across the waves. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, and above, the sky begins to shift subtly as dawn approaches. But before the stars disappear, you notice something else: the clouds. To a casual observer, clouds might just be fluffy white shapes drifting by, but for Polynesian navigators, clouds were secret messengers from the land below, carrying whispers of islands waiting just beyond the horizon. These cloud formations were carefully studied and memorized. Certain types of clouds, known as island clouds, tend to gather over land due to the rising heat and moisture interacting with the island's topography. When you see these clouds hanging low and forming distinctive shapes against the horizon, it can signal that land is near, even if the island itself is still hidden from view. A quirky detail is that navigators sometimes identified the cloud streets long, parallel bands of clouds aligned with prevailing winds that helped them orient their course. They might say something like, "Follow the cloud road, and you'll find your way." Sounds poetic, right? But this was practical wisdom earned from countless voyages. Historians still argue whether all island clouds are truly reliable indicators, or if some observations were interpreted through the lens of tradition and intuition. In the vast Pacific, where weather can be unpredictable, reading clouds was as much art as science. Wind patterns also played a crucial role. Trade winds, the steady breezes that blow east to west in the tropics, were well understood by navigators. They used the winds to time their voyages, setting sail when conditions were favorable and knowing when to seek shelter during storms. A lesser-known fact is that some Polynesian wayfinders could anticipate shifts in the weather by subtle changes in wind direction, temperature, and humidity. This meteorological intuition helped them avoid dangerous squalls and navigate safely. Imagine sailing under a sky full of these natural signs. A certain kind of cloud shape, a sudden change in wind direction, the smell of rain on the breeze, all guiding your canoe towards safe harbor. It's like the atmosphere itself was your co-pilot. Here's a sleepy joke for you. Why did the cloud break up with the wind? Because it was tired of being blown around. The combined knowledge of clouds and winds made Polynesian navigation an intricate dance with the atmosphere. It required constant attention, patience, and respect for nature's moods. So, as you feel the gentle breeze and watch clouds drift lazily across your imaginary sky, think of the ancient navigators who saw not just weather but a map written in vapor and wind, guiding them safely home. Your fingers trace the imaginary lines of the famed Marshall Islands stick charts, a tactile marvel in the world of Polynesian navigation. These stick charts weren't maps in the traditional sense, no paper or ink here, but carefully crafted models made from sticks, shells, and coconut fibers that represented ocean swells, currents, and island positions. They were like 3D mental aids to complement the navigator's internal sky map. Picture a delicate lattice of curved sticks tied together, each curve corresponding to a specific wave pattern. Small shells or bits of wood mark islands or reefs. When held in your hands, these charts offer a physical way to feel the ocean's rhythms, a tool for teaching or planning voyages. Of course, you wouldn't bring one out in the middle of a journey. Imagine trying to balance that on a rocking canoe, but they were essential in training. Here's a quirky tidbit. Not all stick charts looked the same. Different island groups developed distinct styles. Some emphasized swell patterns, others focused more on island locations. It's like regional dialects of a navigation language. Historians still argue about how widespread the use of stick charts was. Some suggest they were primarily teaching aids, while others believe certain navigators relied on them actively during voyages. Whatever the case, their existence shows the ingenuity behind Polynesian navigation. In addition to physical tools, mental techniques played a major role. Navigators committed immense amounts of knowledge to memory star paths, wave behaviors, bird signals, forming a layered mental map that a physical chart could never fully capture. The stick charts helped visualize complex ocean dynamics, making the invisible patterns more tangible. Another fascinating fact, some charts included refraction points, places where waves bend around reefs or islands, revealing hidden hazards or safe passages. This level of detail shows a sophisticated understanding of the sea's mechanics. Imagine an apprentice navigator running their fingers along these charts, learning how invisible ocean currents and swells correspond to physical markers, preparing to translate that knowledge into real-world navigation. It's like studying Braille for the ocean. A sleepy joke to keep your hands busy. Why did the navigator bring a stick chart to the party? To help everyone stay on the right wavelength. So, as you hold this imagined stick chart, marvel at how Polynesian navigators combined tactile tools and mental mastery to make sense of an immense, fluid environment, turning the unpredictable ocean into a map they could trust. You find yourself drifting into a fascinating comparison. Polynesian navigators and their European counterparts, both masters of the seas, yet wielding very different tools and techniques. Imagine the sleek caravels of the age of exploration, with their compasses, sextants, and printed charts, contrasting sharply with the star memorizing, swell reading Polynesian wayfinders. European sailors relied heavily on instruments, magnetic compasses to find north, chronometers to calculate longitude, and charts painstakingly drawn on parchment. Their voyages were often documented, their routes carefully recorded. The Polynesians, meanwhile, navigated by memory, intuition, and a deep connection to nature. Their knowledge was embodied, oral, and adaptable. Here's a quirky thought. Some early European explorers initially dismissed Polynesian navigation as mere guesswork, underestimating the complexity of wayfinding. It's almost like ignoring a secret recipe because it's not written down. Historians still argue about which method was more accurate or efficient. European methods had the advantage of measurable precision, but Polynesian techniques excelled in flexibility and resilience in uncertain conditions. Plus, Polynesian navigation was perfectly adapted to the vastness and variability of the Pacific. A different ocean demands a different approach. European sailors often feared the open ocean, sticking close to coastlines when possible, while Polynesian navigators thrived on long, open water voyages, trusting their senses and skills. The Polynesian double-hulled canoes were lighter and faster compared to European ships, making them well-suited to Pacific waves. Another fun fact: some Polynesian navigators reportedly crossed thousands of miles without ever seeing another vessel, a feat that made European explorers' coastal hugging look almost timid. Their journeys weren't just exploration, they were intentional migrations and cultural exchanges. Despite these differences, the two traditions eventually met, sometimes with misunderstanding, sometimes with admiration. Modern sailors studying Polynesian navigation often marvel at the skill and knowledge encoded in oral traditions. Imagine being caught between two worlds, one relying on instruments and charts, the other on stars and swells, each proud and skilled in their own way. It's a reminder that navigation isn't just about technology, it's about culture, environment, and perspective. Here's a sleepy joke to bridge the gap. Why did the Polynesian navigator invite the European sailor on board? To share some current events. So as you drift between these two worlds, appreciate the rich diversity of human ingenuity, whether measured by compass needle or memorized star paths. All roads, or waves, lead home. You might not have expected this, but Polynesian navigation wasn't a strictly male domain. In fact, stories and debates swirl around the roles women played in voyaging traditions, challenging some long-held assumptions. Imagine a strong woman standing at the prow, her eyes scanning the horizon alongside male navigators, sharing knowledge and even leading journeys. While many documented accounts focus on men, possibly due to the biases of early Western anthropologists, some Pacific Island cultures acknowledged women as skilled navigators and sailors. In some cases, female voyagers held respected positions, their expertise woven into the social fabric of their communities. Here's a quirky tidbit. In certain island societies, women were the keepers of star lore and oral traditions, passing down chants that encoded navigational wisdom. They were the memory banks of wayfinding, even if not always the ones steering the canoe. Think of them as celestial librarians. Historians still argue the extent of women's participation in active navigation versus their roles in knowledge preservation and teaching. The truth likely varies between islands and cultures, with some embracing more egalitarian traditions than others. One fascinating detail is that women's involvement in navigation sometimes carried spiritual significance. Some myths and legends describe goddesses or female ancestors who guided voyagers or taught humans how to read the stars. This spiritual dimension elevated women's roles beyond the practical to the sacred. Imagine the lively debates among scholars. Were Polynesian female navigators pioneers of the open seas, or were they primarily custodians of the knowledge that made navigation possible? Perhaps both roles were equally vital. A sleepy little joke for you. Why did the female navigator always find her way? Because she had star power. The inclusion of women in navigation reminds us that this ancient art was deeply social and multifaceted, with many hands and voices contributing to the success of voyages. So, as you picture the steady gaze of a female navigator, remember that the ocean's story is not just one of bold men and heroic exploits, it's a communal tapestry with many threads, woven together by the wisdom of all. The ocean can be a cruel mistress, and not every Polynesian voyage ended in success. Some journeys were lost to the vastness, their canoes swallowed by storms or simply never heard from again. Yet, even these lost voyages are part of the rich tapestry of Polynesian navigation stories of risk, endurance, and the relentless human spirit. Imagine setting out on a voyage bound for an unknown island, carrying your family's hopes, crops, and tools. Days turn into weeks, and suddenly the stars vanish behind thick clouds. The waves grow restless, and you feel the eerie quiet of the open sea. Sometimes, the ocean claimed these vessels, leaving only legends and whispers behind. A quirky and haunting detail is that some lost voyages inspired revival movements centuries later, as modern navigators attempted to replicate ancient routes using traditional techniques. The famous Hokule expedition in the 1970s, for example, was a direct response to the fading knowledge of wayfinding, proving that these voyages weren't just myths but achievable feats. Historians still debate the causes behind the disappearance of certain voyages. Were they due to navigational error, weather, or social factors like conflict or resource scarcity? Each theory adds a layer of mystery and humanity to the story. Some islands were rediscovered after being abandoned for generations, their populations wiped out or migrated. The ebb and flow of settlement patterns across the Pacific reflect a complex dance of exploration, survival, and adaptation. Imagine the courage it took to embark on such voyages, knowing the odds were often against you, but driven by the promise of new beginnings. It's a testament to human curiosity and resilience. Here's a sleepy joke to lighten the mood. Why don't lost voyagers ever get lonely? Because the ocean keeps them company whether they like it or not. These stories of lost and found voyages remind us that navigation was more than a science. It was a gamble, a leap of faith in the vast unknown. So as you drift into dreams, carry with you the spirit of those voyagers who dared to cross endless waves, guided only by stars, swells, and hope. You feel the hush of ceremony descend as the navigator prepares for the journey ahead. Polynesian voyaging was never just a matter of skill and knowledge. It was steeped in ritual, spirituality, and a deep reverence for the sea and stars. Imagine the scent of burning sandalwood mingling with ocean breeze, chants rising in rhythm as the canoe is blessed before departure. Before setting sail, navigators often engaged in sacred rituals designed to connect the crew with ancestral spirits and the natural world. These ceremonies invoked protection, guidance, and favorable winds. The act of navigating was seen as a sacred duty, a dialogue between humans and the divine forces governing the ocean. A fascinating tidbit: some communities believed the stars themselves were living ancestors, guiding and watching over voyages. The navigator's role was partly to honor these celestial guardians through prayers and offerings. This spiritual dimension infused every voyage with meaning far beyond physical survival. Historians still debate how universal these rituals were across Polynesia. While some islands had elaborate ceremonies, others focused more on practical preparations. Yet the sacred aspect of voyaging appears consistently, highlighting the inseparability of spirituality and navigation. The connection between ceremony and navigation also reinforced social bonds. The community's involvement in rituals ensured collective support and shared responsibility, strengthening cohesion before the uncertain journey. Imagine the navigator standing tall, the chant echoing across the shore as the crew prepares to push off. The waves glisten under a sacred sky, and every sound and gesture carries weight and promise. Here's a sleepy joke to gently lighten the mood. Why did the navigator bring incense on the canoe? To keep the spirits well ventilated. As you settle into the calm of this ritual moment, remember that for Polynesian navigators, the ocean was not a mere environment but a sacred realm, and their voyages were acts of faith, courage, and connection. As you drift forward in time, you witness a vibrant resurgence of Polynesian navigation, a renaissance fueled by pride, cultural revival, and a desire to reconnect with ancestral knowledge. Modern Pacific Islanders, recognizing the importance of this heritage, have breathed new life into the ancient art of wayfinding, sailing once again under starry skies without electronic instruments. The 1976 voyage of the Hokule canoe, meticulously crewed by traditional navigators, sparked a cultural awakening. This double-hulled canoe sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti guided solely by wayfinding techniques, proving that ancient methods were not just stories but living, breathing skills. Imagine the thrill and quiet confidence of those voyagers, trusting stars and swells in a world of satellites and GPS. A quirky modern twist: contemporary wayfinding schools now blend ancient chants and star knowledge with scientific studies, creating hybrid curricula that respect tradition while embracing new understandings. It's like the best of both worlds: old-school wisdom meets modern classroom. Historians still debate how much of the traditional knowledge survived intact through centuries of colonization and modernization. What is undeniable is the passionate effort of communities to reclaim and celebrate their maritime heritage, sometimes against overwhelming odds. This revival goes beyond navigation. It's about reclaiming identity, language, and pride in a history too long marginalized. For many Pacific Islanders, Learning wayfinding is a way to heal cultural wounds and inspire younger generations. Imagine modern crews, young and old, chanting star paths under night skies, their canoes cutting through familiar waves, the echo of ancestors' wisdom carried on the breeze. It's a living connection across time, a beacon of resilience. Here's a sleepy little joke for you. Why did the new generation navigator bring a smartphone? To take a selfie with the stars. As you envision this contemporary voyage, remember that Polynesian navigation is not just history, it's a vibrant, evolving tradition that continues to guide hearts and minds across the Pacific today. You settle into the final stretch of this journey, surrounded by the endless blue and starry skies, reflecting on the enduring mysteries and ongoing debates that continue to surround Polynesian navigation. Even after centuries of study and revival, historians and anthropologists still puzzle over many aspects of this remarkable tradition. For instance, the sheer scale and precision of Polynesian voyaging raise questions about how such complex knowledge systems developed independently and were maintained across vast distances. How did early navigators memorize hundreds of stars and swell patterns without error? How was this knowledge preserved so robustly through oral transmission? A quirky mystery involves the possibility of lost technologies, or forgotten tools like specialized navigational devices or techniques that haven't yet been uncovered. Some scholars speculate that early voyagers might have used natural compasses made from crystals or other materials, but concrete evidence remains elusive. Historians still argue over the origins of certain island populations, whether migrations were primarily eastward from Asia or included return voyages and complex trade routes connecting remote islands. This ongoing debate adds layers of intrigue to the story of human exploration. Another enduring question is the role of intuition versus formal training. Were some navigators born with an innate sea sense, or was mastery entirely a result of rigorous apprenticeship? The answer likely lies somewhere in between, blending talent with relentless practice. Imagine sitting with scholars and navigators alike, sharing theories and stories late into the night, united by fascination and respect for this extraordinary human achievement. Here's a sleepy joke to send you off. Why don't historians ever get lost? Because they always keep track of their sources. As you slowly drift away from these vast oceanic tales, know that Polynesian navigation remains a shining example of human curiosity, resilience, and the profound connection between people and their environment. May your dreams be guided by stars, swells, and the timeless spirit of discovery. The waves gently lap against the hull, a steady, soothing rhythm that seems to echo the heartbeat of the sea itself. The night sky stretches endlessly above, stars twinkling softly like distant lanterns guiding your way home. You feel the warm ocean breeze brush lightly against your skin, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and tropical flowers. Each breath is slow and deep, matching the ocean's calm pulse. There is a quiet majesty in this vast, timeless expanse, the same vastness that once challenged and inspired ancient navigators who trusted their senses, their memories, and the wisdom passed down through generations. Their journey was one of reverence, courage, and harmony with nature's many voices. The stars, the swells, the birds, and the clouds. It was a voyage of trust not only in their skill but in the deep connection between human spirit and the living sea. As your thoughts drift gently, feel the peace that comes with knowing that the ocean's stories are still alive, carried forward by those who remember and honor the past. The flicker of a distant star, the soft whisper of a wave, the flutter of a seabird's wings, all these keep the ancient voyage alive in the present moment. Let your mind float with the gentle tide, softening with each breath, relaxing deeper with every wave's embrace. The vast Pacific may seem endless, but you are held here, safely cradled in this quiet night, where stories and dreams converge. May your sleep be as peaceful and sure as a canoe guided by the stars. Good night, and sweet dreams.